Welcome to our video on using GraphQL with Apollo client in a Next.js application. Let's start by initializing Apollo client. We import necessary functions and classes from the Apollo client package. We create a new instance of Apollo client by providing a re pointing to our GraphQL API endpoint. Remember to replace your GraphQL API endpoint with your actual API URL. We also set up an in-memory cache to efficiently cache query results. Finally, we export the client so that it can be used throughout our application. Next, we need to ensure that our Apollo client is accessible in our Next.js app. This is done by wrapping our application with the ApolloProvider component. Here we import the ApolloProvider and the Apollo client instance we initialized previously. The MyApp component is updated to include the ApolloProvider that takes our client as a prop. This allows us to use Apollo's hooks like useQuery or useMutation in any of our components. Don't forget to adjust the import path to point where your Apollo client is exported. Now, let's create a React component to demonstrate how to execute a GraphQL query. First, we import the GQL tag and useQuery hook from Apollo client. We define our GraphQL query named getData using the GQL template literal tag. This will fetch the fields id and value from our GraphQL API. Ensure you adjust the query fields to match your schema. In the component, we call the useQuery hook with our get_data query. useQuery returns an object with properties such as loading, error, and data which we can use to handle the different states of our request. We render a loading paragraph while the request is in process and an error message if the request fails. Once the data is loaded, we map over the array and render each item. Lastly, we export your component so it can be used in our application.